Hi, and welcome to Picture This, Composing Photos That Engage. My name is Paige, and I work as a librarian at the Queen Creek branch in Maricopa County. Today, I'm going to walk you through different tips and tricks that will help you improve your photography composition skills. Now, as I just mentioned, I'm a librarian, not a photographer. And though I have always loved taking photos, I am in no way a professional in this area. But that's the main reason why I wanted to share this program. You don't have to be a professional or even an amateur photographer to apply these composition rules. So, what is composition? Well, composition essentially means how you line up a shot to make it look as interesting and striking as possible, choosing your viewpoint, image format, and framing to make the very best of your subject. And if that definition seems rather eloquent, it's because I'm actually quoting the Advanced Photography Guide by David Taylor. In my own words, though, this is how I see composition. Before you know the ups and downs of camera settings and how to make yourself look extra glamorous on Photoshop, you need to know how to get the best out of the photo itself. To help you do that, I have compiled a list of 9 composition rules that will get you on the right path. There are a lot more rules that exist beyond these 9, but I wanted to start you off with what I consider to be 9 of the tips that are easy to implement for beginners. I'm going to explain each rule, then provide you with a few examples so you can see what I'm talking about. If you find that you are already familiar with these rules, I do have a few sources at the end that might still be helpful to you. These resources will give further details on what we've covered within today's program, as well as go over other photography elements that we won't be talking about today. Last thing before we get started. These rules are in no way cemented beyond reproach. If you decide not to implement a rule, your photo can still be great. That's entirely up to you. To quote a certain pirate, they're more like guidelines than actual rules. Okay, first up, the rule of thirds. So this rule/guideline comes down to the idea that breaking an image into thirds and placing your subject on those grid lines instead of within the center of the photo is actually more visually appealing. Within this photo, we can see that once you lay the grid over the top of the picture, the subject is directly on that vertical grid line, and they've even placed his cute little face on the grid point where the 2 lines intersect. Here's another example. This photo aligns even more elements to the rule of thirds. Not only is the windmill centered on the first vertical line, but they have divided the photo horizontally as well. The boardwalk lines up perfectly with the horizontal axis. The majority of the water is left in the bottom third of the photo, the body of the windmill in the second, and the clouds in the third. It gives a balance and a structure to the image that allows the eye to focus on the windmill without being confused by the proportions of the image. Within my own experience, this was one of the simplest tips to adopt. Many cameras and phones will allow you to adjust the settings to show a 3x3 grid while you take your photos, which makes it easy to adhere to the rule of thirds. These 2 photos show how shifting the subject so that it follows the rule of thirds can actually help the photo become more focused. Even though I've placed Jennifer off-center, it's still clear she is the subject, and the look of the rest of the image is much improved. And now for something completely different, symmetry. So, symmetry pretty much takes what I just said and throws it straight out the window. Instead of lining up the image in thirds, symmetry often places the subject of the photo in the middle of the shot and allows the similarities around them to draw the eye to what is important. This can happen along the vertical or horizontal axis. Looking at this first image, we can see that if we were to fold this shot vertically, all of the different elements of the photo would line up perfectly with the other side. And given the man's shadow, we could almost do it horizontally as well, which I'm guessing is what the photographer was going for when they took this shot. This style is used a lot with architecture simply because they provide settings that allow more balance than other natural settings. Sometimes, though, the symmetry of an image does not have to be about the background but the subjects themselves. This second example plays with that concept a little bit more. We can see the similarities between the two pairs even though they are not identical. It almost gives the picture a yin and yang feel to it, which is also very balanced as well as symmetrical. As I explored the library, this was one of the hardest rules for me to capture properly. I'm not sure if it's because there just is not very many symmetrical things in the library, unlikely, or if I simply wasn't looking in the right places. Either way, the best advice I can give when trying to create a symmetrical picture is that you should double check that you have a very steady hand, or, even better, a tripod available for you to use, just so you can keep your shot straight. This first picture is me using a table to steady the camera. The second is me simply holding the camera. If you look close enough, you can definitely tell that the second picture has a slight crooked line to it, which will make you go crazy the longer that you look at it. Frames. An easy way to add depth to your photo is by placing the subject within a pre-existing frame within your camera. The nice thing about this technique is that it doesn't go against the two guidelines that we've already discussed and can easily be paired with a lot of other rules on this list. This tip can be used with very obvious elements such as the door frame in the first photo, or more abstract elements such as the brim of the man's hat in the second. Both highlight the space between the photographer and the subjects. In the case of the door frame, it even adds a sense of emotion to the picture. The doorway shifts the viewpoint of the audience to a point where they are on the outside looking in on an intimate moment. The moment is still private, but can still be witnessed by the viewer. Leading lines. Lines are everywhere. It is much harder to take a picture with no lines than the opposite. This rule strives to make you think about those lines that are already in your pictures in a manner that leads the attention of your viewer and gives a sense of movement to the photo. And while I was looking for examples, I came across so many roads. And there's nothing wrong with using a street or a road as a leading line in your photo, but I want you to know that you can do more with this rule as well. Lines can be straight, they can be curved, they can be people, shrubs, animals, or just about anything. Let's look at the far right photo as an example. As you can see, the leading line in this shot are the people themselves. This doesn't take away from the shot because it forces our eye to travel across the whole group instead of being distracted by individuals. It gives a sense of movement to the photo that wouldn't be there if we didn't have them in one straight line. Okay, it's time for some math. Well, not really. Or at least not too much, I promise. This tip may seem odd, sorry for the pun, but can actually be very helpful when deciding how to set up a shot. The rule of odds suggests that including an odd number of subjects or elements creates a better composition instead of even numbers. Ergo, we have 3 donuts instead of 4, and 3 doors behind the bicycle instead of zooming in on just 2. Now, if you actually can do math, which I'm sure most of you can, you have probably noticed that the other photo I've included on this page happens to have 4 figures, which is, well, not an odd amount. I'm not trying to trick you. I just wanted to show how you can still use this rule when you happen to have an even amount of people. If we look at how the children are standing, we can see that the 3 boys are in one group, and the girl is off to the side in what could be considered a separate group, making it 3 and 1, both perfectly odd numbers. It's a great way to adhere to the rule of odds in a unique way without compromising the photo of the 4 children. I'll be honest, I was very skeptical of whether or not this technique would make a difference, so of course I decided to test it out. Here at the Queen Creek Library, we have 3 hot air balloons that hang out above our collection. And of course, in a light bulb moment for myself, I did the math and said, well, that's great. We can just do a quick photo shoot to see if the rule of odds actually helps the composition of the photo. The result? Well, I would say yes. Though there doesn't seem to be too much wrong with the first picture, the 2 hot air balloons are competing for attention. It's hard to see that I'm trying to make the viewer focus on the rainbow hot air balloon instead of the 2 balloons as a whole. By adding in the third hot air balloon, it actually helps streamline the shot and create a line of focus up to that last balloon that I have positioned as the subject. This tip might not be the solution to every photo, but in this case it does help with the composition. Color combinations. If you're someone that loves playing with color like me, this might very well become your favorite rule. The funny thing about the color wheel is that there are endless types of combinations that you can create. There are certainly more combos than what we will discuss today, but I wanted to use these photos to highlight 2 types of combos that you can keep an eye out for within your own photography. The first picture shows what is called a triadic color combination. These colors form an equilateral triangle on the color wheel. Using a triadic color scheme can give the composition a vibrant contrast in colors while still remaining balanced. Within the sunset photo, the color of the forests, the mountains, and the sunset itself are different enough that they contrast against one another, but are not so different that they pull focus from one another. The second type of color combination is called complementary colors. Complementary colors use 2 colors that are on the opposite ends of the color wheel. The women in the second photo are wearing a vibrant red that contrasts dramatically against the green background. This is a sharper contrast than the triadic color scheme and can be used to quickly draw attention to what is important within the shot. Filling the frame. The mind is very quick to convince you that you have indeed focused in on a given subject. Yet the mind also forgets to tell you that before pressing the shutter, you need to take a look to the left or the right of, and above and below your subject. This quote by Brian Peterson perfectly encompasses why this rule is important. Many times, the background makes the shot, but other times, that's just simply not the case. And when your surroundings start to take away from what you're trying to say, it may be time to get rid of them. One way to do this is by having your subject fill the entire frame. There are a few different ways to use this technique. As we can see in the first 2 photos, the photographers took filling the frame quite literally, to the point that most of their subject is actually cut out of the frame. This doesn't take away from the photos though, it actually accomplishes a few different tasks. The first, obviously, is that it removes any distracting elements. The second is that it allows the viewer to see details that they wouldn't normally be able to within a wider angle. This is clear in the second photo of the woman holding her hands up to her face. If you look close enough, you can actually see the photographers reflected in the woman's eyes. Which almost begs the question, is the woman the subject? Or is it actually the photographer themselves? Whatever the case, we wouldn't be asking this question if the photographer hadn't decided to fill the frame with the woman's face. You don't have to get extremely close to people to fill the frame of a shot, though. In the last photo, where the woman is holding the fan, we can still see some of the background, but the majority of the shot is still made up of the woman and the fan. In the case of this photo, getting too close to the woman would be a mistake. Cutting out the fan would take away the story of the photo. Cutting out the woman and her expression would take away the emotion. By leaving both of them in, the heart of the photo is still intact. Deciding how to use this tip can depend on what you are trying to say with your photo. Both of these photos use the filling the frame rule, but they each tell a very different story. While I was taking these photos, I was trying to focus on the book and capture the sense of hiding away from the world and reading a good novel. And I know, I can hear it. Could I be any more of a librarian right now? The thing is, while both of these pictures are stylistically sound, the second image is a better representation of what I was trying to show. Personally, when I look at the first image, I see the chair and then the drink before I even register that there is a book. This wouldn't be such a horrible thing if the chair was what I was trying to show. By moving closer as I did in the second photo, I'm able to show the book's details and shape more easily. The chair and the drink are still there, but they now complement the book instead of fighting against it. Negative space. As I mentioned, One of the main outcomes of filling the frame is to remove the background so there's little to distract from the subject themselves. Ironically, almost the exact same outcome can be achieved by doing the exact opposite of filling the frame. Taking a wider angle and using a simple background creates negative space, which, as the quote says, emphasizes the shape of your subject. And as we can see in these photos, using a simple background to create negative space draws the attention of the viewer to the subject just as easily as filling the frame does. This is a technique that has found new popularity within recent years. It can be hard to determine why more people are using this technique, but one thing's clear: the minimalistic background creates a very striking contrast. The rule of space. This rule could almost be considered a 2-for-1 deal, and the reason being is that it deals with two separate concepts: movement and eyesight. The reason that I've placed them on the same slide, though, is that the rule itself pretty much stays the same. So, our minds do this weird thing where they automatically track movement and eyesight, and what that essentially means is that we want to know where people are going, and we want to see what people are seeing. Because of this, the rule of space states that if you have a person or subject moving in a photo, or looking into the shot, as opposed to looking towards the camera, then you should provide space in the direction that they are moving/looking. The girl on the swing is moving to the left of the photographer, so they have placed her on the right side of the photo so that she's moving across the frame. Similarly, the boy in the second picture is looking into the frame instead of outside the frame. Now, you might ask, well, what does it even matter? He's not looking at anything anyway. But like I said, it's kind of this knee-jerk reaction that our brains have. So adhering to this rule can give the shot a more natural and cohesive composition. Real quick, I wanted to go over a few more points about negative space and the rule of space that I discovered while I was taking photos for this program that you might find interesting. So in the Queen Creek Library, we have a giant blue wall. And I knew right away that it would make a great background to showcase negative space. So, I kept trying to take photos of the small fiction sign that we see in this picture here, but none of the photos that I took had enough to keep the viewer's attention. I mean, they were really just rather boring. It wasn't until I asked Jennifer to step up on a ladder and dust the sign that there was an actual draw to the photo. Which leads me to the point I'm trying to make. Though I knew from the beginning that I had a great background, it didn't mean anything until I had a subject to provide a shape and a story for that background. I also wanted to clarify that the rule of space can be utilized in instances where your subject is moving a different direction besides just left and right, even though that's the only directions I really showed you on that last slide. In this photo, Lynn is moving away from me further into the background of the shot. Because of this, I composed the photo so that we as an audience are behind her and looking towards the direction that she's moving, which means we're still complying with the rule of space. Advanced grids. I know I said at the beginning of the program that we would be going over 9 basic rules, but I really wanted to include these 2 advanced grading systems as a bonus round, just to give you something beyond the basics that you can move on to next. These 2 grid systems, the golden ratio and dynamic symmetry, function similar to the rule of thirds, but consider more than just dividing the frame into thirds and squares. The first picture is a great example of how the golden ratio can be used. This grid is created by a mathematical equation that, when used correctly, is theorized to create the most visually appealing compositions. The important thing to remember with this grid is the viewer's eyesight. What it comes down to is that you want the viewer to follow the spiral line, starting from the center and working their way out. In this picture, the photographer uses the brightness of the lamp to draw your eye to the light first. From there, our eyes follow the outline of the window frame up to the woman's face. This photo uses the golden ratio so that the last thing we look at is the woman's face. The second advanced grid system that we'll discuss briefly here is dynamic symmetry. This grid does use the rule of thirds, but it also considers diagonal lines and planes. We can see that one diagonal line lines up rather well with the head of the cat, while another line follows the bottom of the blue curtain. The cat is even leaning parallel to another line, and even though there are some aspects of the shot that don't line up perfectly with the grid system, there are enough compelling angles that give the photo a very nice composition. One of the reasons why these might be considered advanced gridding systems is because it's much harder to plan these compositions while you're taking photos. As we talked about earlier, you can often find a rule of thirds grid system that you can use while taking photos, but for these grids, that's simply not the case. So instead, photographers have to rely on their memory to compose the shots. It may not be easy, but it's something that can come with practice. I certainly hope you enjoyed these techniques and learned a tip or two you will want to try within your own photos. If you want to find more compositional tips, or if you want to find information on other photography elements that we didn't cover here, I have listed the resources that I used for this program. These 3 books are phenomenal guides and are obviously a much more professional source than myself. They have so much more details that we simply weren't able to talk about here, so I highly recommend you check them out. Something else I wanted to highlight was the online Photoshop resource that is offered through the Learning Express website. Photoshop is something that we did not even glance at, and that is for a very good reason. I am horrible with Photoshop. So, because of that, I'll simply lead you straight to the source and recommend that you check out the Learning Express tutorial. It's free with your library card, and you can do it from home. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Paige, and I work at the Queen Creek branch. I hope you all have a wonderful week.